On April 3rd, this year, 2021, right after I had taught an online workshop for the language faculty here at the American University in Cairo, I was invited to tune into the Pharaoh's Golden Parade that was being live streamed just an hour after my workshop had ended. And as I watched this magnificent display, this parade of 22 mummified kings and queens that was moving through the streets of Cairo, I was moved to tears by the pageantry, the history, the leadership that I could only imagine these pharaohs had provided so many centuries ago. And certainly some were good and some probably not so good, as all of our political leaders are. But they all played a role in shaping the vision for an Egypt that would persevere into the future. And so I found myself asking myself, what role do we educators play? What vision do we have for our students and their futures? And I began recounting the difficulties that we had faced in 2020 and 21 around the world, from political to economic to social distresses, much caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. And then I reflected on the pharaohs and their struggles that they had to overcome thousands of years ago: famine, war, political unrest, budgets. But they persevered. Today, we hope our students may persevere as well and do good things in our world. So my question then kind of became, how can we best help our students as educators? I'm convinced that the number one thing we can do as educators to help our students is to engage them, so that they will be better prepared to go out into the world and do good things. So today I want to talk about engagement. Two kind of broad ideas here. One, how do we meet the challenges of student engagement? And two, how can we be more inclusive in that engagement? We've largely returned to in-person teaching, and now we've added hybrid options. But the fully online options, they're going to be here to stay. They offer us some convenience and cost savings and expanded reach. So anyway, let's dive in and talk about engagement and how that might look moving forward. So let me share my screen. If I can make this work. So here was, just a screenshot that I grabbed from the Golden Parade. It was just an amazing thing. It's still posted online. And so if you haven't seen it, by all means, take a look. It's moving and historic. It just gives you a frame of reference to the history that has transpired. Neat stuff. So, all right, let's jump in. Inclusive engagement. I'm Brian Raison. I hang out at Ohio State University. And so please, thank you for allowing me, inviting me to speak at this conference. I'm really psyched. So let's just jump in. This is a recording, of course. Hopefully you're seeing me live and you're not watching this, but if you are, here would be kind of my opening question. What's a top concern before COVID-19, before we moved everything online? What was the top concern or a challenge you faced as an educator? A number of things jump into my mind. Oh, too many students in the classroom, not enough budget. I mean, just, standard things. We've thought about these for years and faced these challenges. So then let's shift the question. Now, 2 years nearly into COVID, moving 100% online, then back to in-person now, and hybrid options moving forward. Today, what's a top concern or challenge moving forward? Anecdotally, I'll just give you some of the things that I have read, that I've been listening to and hearing in faculty meetings and informal discussions and polls, higher ed articles I've been reading. In addition to, in 2020, during the pandemic, I trained just over 3,500 people across largely the United States about online engagement and learning, and we had many conversations. And so before, the major concerns were lack of time to prepare, everybody's teaching too much. The teaching loads are heavy, our research loads, diverse learning needs, student prep, these things that are pretty standard. But those have shifted. And so today, what I'm hearing and what we're discussing, just yesterday, I had a faculty meeting and we were just talking about, well, some of these items. So we need different skills to remain effective. The technology requirements are changing, I think, every day. I was like, there's something new. Student mental health. That's what I was getting ready to say. Occasionally, this came up in the past, but now at every faculty meeting, this is a topic. And then inclusive teaching. How can we be more culturally diverse and sensitive, and including those that broad range of diversity that we have in our students? And then finally, engagement, which is the overall theme. So in my summary, kind of the overall point that I have come to is that engagement is the key. But engagement doesn't just happen. We're competing. Now, for years, we've known that on the surface, we're competing with student attention, TikTok, whatever that is, social media. We've known these things for years. A shifting culture that students kind of want to be entertained. We want to have to keep their attention for some reason now. We've talked about this. But the personal competition has increased dramatically in the last few years. Stress, mental health, exhaustion. So today, I want to talk about two things. How can we address this competition? Those things on the surface, and then those personal things, that stress and mental health, to achieve better engagement. And how can we expand that idea of inclusive engagement? So to do that, I'll talk about some research findings of a study we did this year here at Ohio State. I'll talk about some approaches. I'm an affiliate faculty member with the Ohio State's Teaching Institute, which works university-wide to help improve teaching at Ohio State. And then I'll just talk about some ideas that I've gleaned and read and heard from many, many conversations. So let's jump in. First, the research study. Here are some of my colleagues that worked with me on this, other faculty members here at Ohio State, teaching staff and faculty. And it was a small sample size. It was a qualitative study. We wanted to hear real voices of students. We had 51 respondents, and I've summarized, well, here, so this is what we wanted to know. And again, you can go back and look at this. I'll provide the slide deck. But we wanted to basically know, what techniques did you find helpful in the online engagement? What did the instructors do to increase your engagement with the material, the content of the class? And then what helped you connect or engage with each other? So just a quick few summaries. And again, the handouts or the PowerPoint slide deck will have 10 or 12 slides at the end that I added with additional detail, quotes from students and things like that. So be sure to look at those. But just for a quick synopsis, in the synchronous, when the classes were meeting live, how did the instructor, well, this is what we kind of coded out of the responses that we read. Interaction was a key component. Using those breakout rooms, small groups, we know this now. Having a welcoming environment, that safe space, taking the time to share and have a little more personal interaction was really key. And then the material delivery, how was it conveyed, the information, use of videos, Jamboard, YouTube, again, mixing it up a little bit. These parallel that competition that I mentioned before, holding their attention, helping them work through or deal with stress, becoming a little more personal and engaged with our students. In asynchronous classes where it was not live, it was just posted on your course management system. How did the instructor help you understand the material? Again, our coded themes, active learning. Students were invited to bring examples to share. So they were more involved in the learning process. Some optional Zooms were offered. Clarity in the assignments. Give more details. I'm guilty of having that broad rubric. Well, put some more detail in there. Provide that roadmap. spell it out because it was more necessary, particularly with the abstraction of distance in the last couple of years. And today I'm going to say it's more necessary with just higher stress as I'm talking with my students and colleagues. And then just availability, being available one-on-one to talk, to build community, to give that true constructive feedback versus generic. It doesn't resonate as much. But we also discovered some disconnects, of course. One instructor never engaged. Oh, we hated seeing this, but you know it's out there. And so I just, transparency, I want to say, some of our students had bad experiences with online instruction during the pandemic. I pretty much taught myself the class is horrible. This is what we have to overcome. And then a third question, and just one more that I'll share. In the synchronous classes, how did the instructor help you connect with each other? And again, the coded themes on the bottom there provided time, that conversational time at the beginning and or the end of class to connect. And then the interaction, that group chat, the work, doing partners, peer reviews, switching partners around so they get to know each other. Just a quick quote. And this to me this epitomizes inclusion. The instructor had a question at the beginning of each class. Each student had to share. This was engaging. So by the end, we knew our classmates, even in the online environment. Recognize that in doing this, the professor's recognizing that students have a voice, each student. If you vary those questions, you can dramatically increase inclusion with some of those cultural, personal, diverse natures that we sometimes miss. I use a thing called We Connect. It's a little deck of cards with questions on it from We and Me. You can check that out. I don't know the folks personally, but I've been using them for a couple of years. It's really good stuff. They call it connection before content. And a couple of example questions that I'll just share real quickly. What's something life's teaching you right now? Talk about it in person or online. This can be a really engaging question that can bring people in and start to connect them before you jump into whatever the content may be. What might you tell someone who's feeling anxious about whatever, their job? This one gives a little bit of abstraction. The person doesn't have to say that they are feeling anxious or worried, but they can say, you're asking, what advice would you give a friend? And so that helps people open up even more and provides a safer dialogue. And the last one I absolutely love. This can just lift the spirit of your classroom because it just sets off brain chemicals. What brings you joy? In just a couple of minutes, have the students pair up in person or share in the chat and out loud online. It can really elevate the mood of the class. And then when you jump into your content, whatever that may be, people are more awake and a little more alive. And it's just an engagement technique that really, really works. Another quote, instructors that were intentional about creating a community, a sense of community, increase my personal engagement and attentiveness to the content. Personal connection. So think of different learning styles, VARC, and I'll talk about this in a minute, the students that are more visual or auditory or reading or kinesthetic motion and learn by doing. A cultural example, contextualizing the lessons. So we think about Malcolm Knowles, andragogy, adult learning theory. Students are adults, and even my graduate students, some of them are 20s, 30s, 40 years old. And so they want that context. They want to relate what they have, their lived experiences, to the lesson. So this is another way of increasing that inclusion and engagement for your students by recognizing this. So what is inclusion? How does it fit with engagement? One, it humanizes the content, as I just mentioned, with culture and meaning and choice. We saw that a lot in our survey, in our most recent research in the spring as well. That students really like having a choice of some of the activities that they might do or the research that they might bring in. Sharing stories and then listening to those, hearing, really is a connector for people and showing that we care. Again, humanizing that classroom and the difference that that makes. But inclusive engagement starts with us. I talk about this a lot with my colleagues, being vulnerable, being transparent, building trust in the classroom is a critical piece that we need to be aware of. Challenge yourself to learn new techniques. Include your students. Ask them, what is this TikTok thing that I have two daughters in college. They're on their, what is that? What? It can be fun. And again, you're including them and you're showing a little bit of that vulnerability that I don't know everything. Yeah. Okay. Inclusive engagement. I love this idea. We saw this again in the research and it's in the literature right now. Giving students some options really increases their engagement. Let them choose a partner. Let them choose an assignment. Let them choose a subject, if possible, in the context of your class. And this, I've given these examples, I think in the spring with one of the seminars with the language faculty there at American University in Cairo. Have them describe a painting at a local art museum. Or I love this, the second one. Describe a street scene on a Monday morning or on a Saturday night. That same scene and the contrast. I mean, imagine what the students can bring. Make them go down there and immerse themselves, a sense of place. It's powerful stuff. Explain the significance of a local monument or teach about a traditional food. So many of us have foods that we love. And that's another brain awakening and engaging topic, because most of us have foods that really connect and we like to talk about them. So don't get me started. I could go on about some foods. All right, I mentioned VARK. A lot of you probably know this, that people have different learning styles. So the visual, they're seeing, observing, pictures, diagrams, things like the auditory. And again, you can go back and look at this, please do, or read a quick article on it. They prefer listening. They really take that information in better than reading it. Then the readers or the writers, they might read the text and write notes because that makes it translate from their brain through the pen and back into their brain and solidifies. And then they learn by doing. The kinesthetic folks, they want to be moving around and doing things, and that's making those the information, the content cement in their minds. I love Kathy Cook's, I think she retired from the University of Wisconsin a few years ago, but she sort of reimagined Garner's multiple intelligences theory at Harvard, 1980, whenever that was. With instead of multiple intelligence, she just called it 8 smarts. So a real simplified version, but I love the idea. Some of our students are word smart. They think with words, other concepts, cause, effect, compare, contrast, that logical mind. And then there's the pictures, the visual people, the music, the rhythms and cadences. That's how they kind of connect. Or the body smart, the movement, the nature, people. And then the internal, the deep thinkers and reflectors. And so when we think about our students and that they're different, everybody has a little bit of all those, but some have a propensity toward one or two. So when we think about that, then we change up our engagement, or we offer a variety, and we can be sure to connect those students, all of our students. It's powerful stuff. Okay, take a drink. All right, so this is where I started. Engagement. We're competing for the student attention, to be a little bit entertaining, but then we're also competing with the stress, the increased mental health worries, and just exhaustion. Maslow comes back into play. Normally, we have that big foundational physiological need. And once that need is met, then we move on up the hierarchy. But with the stresses and the changes and the online teaching and just everything, sometimes safety or those social connections actually become bigger in a student's mind than even having the basic physiological needs met of food and shelter. So to speak up in a class in person or to unmute online can be paralyzing. So we just need to remember that and find ways, again, of starting out the class. What brings you joy? And welcoming the students and getting them to relax, like in person as well as online. Showing diversity really matters. And I just mentioned a few things about being deliberate here with inclusive language on the words that you say, working to understand your audience and the diversity that they're bringing. Universal design as you're setting up your class in a course shelf, it's online, or even in person. Changing up your teaching strategies, I've talked about that this whole time. Providing opportunities for your students to include their culture or their background or sharing things like that, and celebrating diversity, not just in our examples, but in our citations. Are we changing up our literature? Are we looking for other authors to read and to cite that are more current, perhaps? We keep the tried and true, yeah, but can we bring in other voices? And then encouraging participation, of course. I know the iceberg, yeah. But it's good to remember, it's good for me to remember that we only see this small amount on the surface, what somebody looks like, maybe their skin color or how they speak, their behavior. Dog is, I think, seeing a squirrel. Sorry about that. But under the surface is this hidden diversity. And the distance, when we're at a distance, it makes it even more difficult to see that. So, but we need to keep that in mind, those values and beliefs, the worldviews that are below the surface as we're working and inviting them to engage in our classrooms. So whether you're teaching online, in person, hybrid, students have lives and stories. And I contend we can best reach them when we get to know them better. That's the absolute key. I love this other quote. It was difficult, but some professors really took time to redo their courses so we could better connect with each other and with them. Joy comes from belonging. I don't know if any of you follow Gary Burnison. He's a CEO of Korn Ferry, worldwide, international consulting, kind of a leadership guru. He talks about joy from belonging. Fitting in, that's just kind of superficial. You're in the room, but belonging is really being included, is getting to participate. And so making sure that our students have this higher level of not just they're in the room, but they belong. And we set the environment to let that happen. It's a bit of a nuanced distinction, but there's another level that we need to be cognizant of. And some of the things that I've mentioned can really help make that happen. I love this study from about 10 years ago. Can we create serendipity? That's oxymoronic. But they talked with students 10 years after their degree. They said, what do you remember about your undergrad or your college years? And it wasn't the math or the engineering or the science. It was, they remembered a critical moment when a professor said, hey, you've been really right. Have you thought about grad school? Or, hey, you've got some real talent. You have an affinity for whatever that is. And those are the things that they remember. And we can actually identify those opportunities when we know our students better and when we're doing some of these things to include them and to engage them. Powerful stuff. And I love the idea of serendipitously finding a moment to encourage a student. It can change their life. All right, student voices. Here's kind of a quintessential overall. Can we try to keep the classroom a place where students can leave their burdens at the door? That was a quote from one of the students in our study. Kind of tells the story. Key takeaways, let's just wrap up. Engage. Address the competition, that social media, the phone, constant. Address the personal stress, the mental health, the exhaustion. Give your students permission to breathe. Do a quick breathing exercise in your classroom. I've done that. My students at first think you're a little weird, but then they're like, and they start to smile. And then be inclusive in that engagement, connecting your students, making all feel welcome. These tools that we gained during the online teaching will continue to be valuable in face-to-face and hybrid classes as we move into the future. So shukran, thank you so much. I am so thankful to be here to engage with you at the conference. I wish we were in person. I would love to see Egypt. Again, watching the parade of pharaohs and reading some history was just so engaging. So bless you, thank you, and I look forward to continuing our engagement and interaction.